Today we're going to start by making a delicious garden marinara sauce. This is going to use a lot of your tomatoes and a lot of your fresh garden produce that you have coming in that maybe you don't have enough of those items to preserve them separately, but you can add them into this sauce to make something completely delicious and incredibly nourishing for your family. So I've already prepped my tomatoes by slicing them in half and coring them and roasting them in the oven at 425 for 1 hour. If you wanted to do this on the stovetop, you could also place your tomatoes in a pan and just let those cook down to get really nice and soft and heated up. I'm going to be using a sauce maker called Johnny Applesauce Sauce Maker. That's going to make really quick work of these tomatoes. It is going to remove the skins and the seeds from the pulp of the tomato. So it can be a little bit labor intensive, but I think this is a pretty handy tool to have. So we're gonna go ahead and load the hopper of this up, and I'm gonna take my tamper and just kind of guide the tomatoes down through there into the auger, and I'm gonna go ahead and spin that handle to work the tomatoes through, and there is a sieve that the tomatoes are being pressed out of, and then the skins and the seeds come out another area, so it keeps it separate from your sauce. Here you can see a little bit of a better picture of that. So there's other attachments that can go on to this sauce maker to make applesauce, to get rid of seeds in blackberries and raspberries, so it's a really versatile tool. So we're gonna work through all of our tomatoes and put them in a large stock pot. So I've already had all of these boiling down for about 4 to 5 hours, and you can see how thin and watery this still is. This is not going to be the consistency of the marinara sauce that you want. So once you've boiled it down for a while, I would say maybe boiling it down to about 3/4 of what it was when you started, go ahead and add in some tomato paste. I add about 4 jars of tomato paste to about 40 pounds of tomatoes. That's what I'm working with today. If you don't do that, you are going to lose a ton of volume and you will not end up getting hardly any marinara sauce by the time that you're done. 40 pounds of tomatoes is going to yield me about 8 quarts of marinara sauce. So tomatoes do really cook down a lot. So adding the tomato paste is going to do you a big favor. So once we get those opened, we're gonna add them into the pan, and then we're gonna work with all of our fresh vegetables that we have coming in from the garden. First, we're gonna start with 6 good-sized cloves of garlic. Now, if you want more garlic, you can totally add that in. I love to use a lot of garlic in my marinara sauce. I'm gonna use a garlic crusher just to get this really finely crushed up. After that, we're going to go ahead and cut up a large yellow onion. I would recommend a yellow or a Vidalia onion. I wouldn't use a white one or red ones. I would think that that might be a little bit strong, but if you've done that before and that's your preference, then you can totally do that. But I just kind of err on the side of a sweeter onion. We're gonna get that into the pan and get that over to the stove and add a little bit of olive oil to it. And the next thing that we're gonna work on are some green peppers. I have about 5 to 6 green peppers that I'm gonna go ahead and take the cores and the seeds out of, and we'll chop those up just like we did the onions, and we're gonna get that in the pan, and we're gonna go ahead and turn our stove on. My burner is broken, so I have to light it with a match, which is kind of tedious, but that's okay. And we're gonna get these things sauteing so that our onions become translucent and our peppers start to soften up. While those are cooking on the stove, we're going to get to work on some eggplant. So I've had a few eggplant that have been in my refrigerator and a few that I just harvested yesterday. So you do not have to remove the skins of your eggplant. They will soften up just nicely. But some of these had some brown spots and things since they had been in my refrigerator. So I'm just removing any bad spots, and then we're gonna dice this up in about the same size as we did the other vegetables. And we're going to get these into the pan once our onions are translucent and things sort of seem to be softening up. So we're gonna give this a nice mix, and then we're gonna go ahead and season it. If you find that you have other vegetables like zucchini or summer squash that you want to add in, feel free to do that. I am a lousy grower of zucchini, so I don't have any of those, and I am waiting on my 3rd succession of summer squash to come in, so I just don't have any, but I find that those add a really nice sweetness to your sauce. The only thing that I'm going to add here is some Lowry's garlic salt. I find that this salt is so flavorful. We will end up adding a few things into our sauce in a minute here, but for right now, we're just going to season those vegetables with that garlic salt. While that sautés, we are going to add in some things to our marinara sauce now. So the first thing that I'm going to use is some basil from last year. I basically took a lot of basil, put it in my Vitamix, and blended it with some olive oil, and then put it in ice cube trays. This gives you that fresh basil taste all year long. So those are going to go ahead and just kind of melt into your sauce. You can see the addition of that tomato paste earlier really helped to thicken this up. And the vegetables are also going to help to make a great consistency in this. So we're going to add in our vegetables now, and we're going to let them just kind of hang out in the sauce for a little bit while it simmers. I don't know, I maybe do about 15 to 20 minutes and just kind of let it cook there and stirring it occasionally. The next thing I'm going to add is about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Just trust me on this one. You may not like this sauce, but it really adds so much to the marinara. And then also soy sauce. This may not be something that you've heard of either, but please just try it. I think you'll thank me in the end. So now that we have everything in there, we're going to get an immersion blender out and blend all of this to a nice consistency so that you don't even know that the vegetables are in there. The peppers are going to give this a beautiful flavor, the onions and the garlic and the eggplant. And then, of course, like I said, if you had summer squash or zucchini, it's just going to add so much flavor to this. This is also the point where you could add in any spices that you wanted, like oregano or parsley, or maybe you wanted to add a black pepper or something like that. So kind of feel free to experiment with some of those spices and really whatever your family prefers. So after blending it up, you can see how nice and thick and rich this sauce looks. You can see how much thicker it is than when we started, and this is gonna be perfect to can. Now you could also can this with meat if you wanted to add in 1 to 2 pounds of a ground pork or a ground beef. You could totally do that. Your canning times are going to differ. So with the garden marinara sauce, we're gonna go ahead and get this jarred up. I use wide mouth quart jars for this. 2 quarts will maybe get us through a meal. Sometimes I will add in some crushed tomatoes and some other vegetables after I take this out of the jar just to make it go a little further. But the flavor of this right out of the jar is perfect for a spaghetti sauce. I'm just simply adding things to it when I take it out of the jar because we are such a big family and I just want to make it go further. So when we get these in our jars, we're going to leave about 1 inch of headspace, and then we're going to be really careful to make sure that we wipe the rims off of this. We do have some olive oil in this sauce and want to make sure that there is no grease on the rims. Now we're going to put our rings on, and we're just going to do that finger tight. I am going to be pressure canning my sauce. When you water bath can, they want you to add in an extra acid, and I am not a fan of how that changes the flavor. It completely takes the sauce from a beautiful marinara sauce to just something that does not taste good at all. So I'm gonna load up my All-American canner here, and we are going to get this up to pressure, and we'll process these quart jars for 25 minutes. Now, if you were doing meat in this, you would process your quart jars for 70 minutes to make that a safe product. So once this gets up to pressure and the timer goes off, then we'll bring it down, and these will be all finished, and we will be ready to go on to the next project. Okay, here is a recipe that I think you all are going to really appreciate. I don't know how many times I have seen people asking in different forums and online how to get crisp pickles. This is the only way that I have found how to get crisp pickles. It just produces such a crunchy pickle. Think of like a Claussen pickle from the grocery store. The first thing you're going to do is use pickling cucumbers. That is so important. Next, you're going to slice off both ends, and then you can either slice your pickles or cucumbers in rounds. You can slice them at 1/4 of an inch thick, or you could do spears if you wanted to do that. Then you're going to place them into a bowl, and you're going to take 2 tablespoons of a canning salt, so something that's non-iodized. I think I might have used a Himalayan pink sea salt here. And you're going to go ahead and toss your cucumbers in that salt, coat them really well, and then let them sit for 3 hours in the refrigerator. After 3 hours, you're going to drain off the liquid from the bottom, and then you're just going to pat them dry. Do not rinse your cucumbers. You will be tempted to rinse them. Do not rinse them. To each pint jar, I'm adding a clove of garlic, and then I'm going to work with my cucumbers to kind of place them in the jar so that I don't have any really large pockets of airspace. I'm not packing them in there where I might be bruising or damaging them, but I am kind of trying to get them in there somewhat snugly. Now, once those are done, I'm going to add a half a teaspoon of mustard seed, a half a teaspoon of dill seed, a half a teaspoon of dried dill. If you have fresh dill on hand, you can just omit the dried dill and use 2 sprigs of fresh dill, and then a half of a teaspoon of pickle crisp. Here I have my brine. It's been on the stove and it's been heated to a boil. This is just 3 cups of white vinegar, 3 cups of water, and 1/4 cup of sugar. Now, once you get that boiling, this is where you're gonna go ahead and add it to your jars. You're gonna wanna add it where you have a 1/2 inch of headspace, and you're really gonna wanna try to debubble these jars. So if you have a chopstick or something, that's gonna help, and don't be afraid that you're gonna damage the cucumbers with this. There are a lot of air pockets in these cucumbers, and you wanna make sure to get those out. So use that chopstick to kind of go down the edges of the jar and release any bubbles, and then you can work to add a little bit more brine if you need to. You are going to want to clean the rims of your jars really well so that there's nothing on there that could prevent your flat lids from sealing, and then you're just going to put your rings on finger tight. And this is where the important part comes in. You're going to put these into a water bath canner where the water has been heated to 140 degrees. Then you're going to lower your jars into the water. You're going to cover them by 1 inch of water, and you'll want either a digital thermometer or a really long thermometer. You'll see I have one sticking out of my water bath canner here, and you're going to slowly heat that water up to 180 degrees. Once the water gets to 180 degrees, you are going to hold it between 180 to 185 for 30 minutes. When that's done, promptly remove them from the water, and you will have the crispest pickles that you never thought were possible. Okay, moving on to something a little more fun here. Let's work with some peaches. So we have brought in about 4 bushels of peaches this year, as well as almost 1 bushel from our own trees. You can see that these have a little bit of hail damage, and a typical bushel would have cost me $80, but I got an entire bushel for $24 because I negotiated with them for these peaches. We are going to be making a delicious and decadent peach bourbon jam. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is prepping our peaches. Now, I tend to peel my peaches with a paring knife. You can score the bottom of your peaches and put them into boiling water for about a minute, and then plunge them into an ice bath, and the skins should slip off. This works especially well if your peaches are ripe. If they are anywhere where they're not ripe, the skins are not going to come off easy for you, but I just prefer to do it with a knife. So we're gonna get all of these peeled. We're gonna go ahead and split them in half and take the pit out, and then we're going to put them in a large bowl where I have put some water and just maybe about 1/8 cup of lemon juice to keep them from discoloring. Once I have all of the peaches prepared, we're gonna go ahead and get these into my Vitamix. Now, I'm going for a pureed jam, but you could dice these up really finely or chop them really however you want, but you're just looking for 4.5 cups of peaches. Once you have your fruit, you're gonna add that to your pan, and I always use a pan that is much bigger than I need, because sometimes when you're making jam, that fruit and pectin and sugar mixture can boil up, and you do not want to be worrying about if this is gonna boil over, because it will make a huge mess on your stove and it will ruin your recipe. So we're going to add 6 tablespoons of ball real fruit pectin into this, and I'm going to use a whisk to make sure that that is nice and mixed up and that we don't have any clumps in there. The next thing that I'm going to add is a little less than a tablespoon of chopped up candied ginger. This just gives you a little bit of extra flavor. And then I'm going to add in 1/4 cup of bourbon, as well as a quarter of a cup of lemon juice. And we're gonna make sure that that is all nice and mixed up, and we're gonna start heating that. Now, once it gets to a boil that you cannot stir down, you're gonna add in your sugar all at once. And so this calls for 7 cups of sugar. I know that that seems like a lot, but trust me, this is delicious. And we don't mind sugar here. So we're using an organic sugar. I find that Costco has the best price on sugar anywhere. So just a little FYI there. So you're gonna mix in all of your sugar, and you are going to keep heating this until you get back to a boil. That's going to ensure that that sugar will dissolve completely. And the reason that you really need this much sugar when you're using a regular pectin is because regular pectin is activated by sugar. And so you really don't want to mess with the sugar ratios in this. So once you get to a nice boil just like this, you're going to go ahead and boil it for 60 seconds. And I have a spoon here. I like to keep spoons in my freezer just so that I can make sure that we have actually reached the gel stage. Put a little dab of jam onto your spoon and run your finger through it. And you can see that that is nice and set up. The sides of that jam are not running back together. So I know that my jam is gonna set up. I've seen so many people complain and say, oh man, I did my jam and now it looks watery and syrupy. So always use that method, or you could even do it on a plate. Just make sure that your item is nice and cold, that it's been in the freezer. We're gonna go ahead and get these jarred up in cute little jelly jars, leaving a 1/4 inch of headspace. And then we are going to get them processed in our water bath canner. These are gonna process for just 10 minutes, and when they're ready to come out, just go ahead and take them out of the water bath canner and just set them on a dish towel on your counter and just kind of leave them undisturbed there for about 12 to 24 hours. These look so beautiful, and I can tell you that we have cracked open a jar of this and it is just incredibly flavorful, and the bourbon just adds such a flavor to it. Now don't worry, the cooking process does cook that alcohol off, but you could use this on crackers with cream cheese, you could put this on a cheesecake, all kinds of options for this. All right, here we are with just a little bit of more fruit today. We are overloaded with blackberries and blueberries and strawberries and everything else that's coming in from the garden. So you can see here, we're picking these. We're down in the garden every couple of days getting some blackberries. And because we don't have a lot of time on our hands, we are processing a lot of our fruit in the same way, which is by flash freezing. Now, when I do this, that is super helpful for me because it takes a lot of work off of my plate quickly. Once I get these frozen, I will go ahead and vacuum seal these and get these into the freezer. And later on during the slower winter months, I can make jams, I can make syrups, I can make, gosh, anything that you want that you could typically make with a fruit. You could also do smoothies with it. You can make cobblers, you could put them in quick breads or muffins or just a whole host of things. Just a piece of advice here, if you are processing as much food as we are, go ahead and save yourself some time and order some pre-sealed bags off of Amazon for your vacuum sealer. This saves me a lot of time already having these bags prepared and ready to go so that I only have to seal up the top side. Now I'm doing these in really large portions, but you could measure them out into cup measurements so that they're ready for certain recipes. But really, we have gallons of blackberries coming in every couple of days, and so I just need to get them in these bags and put in my freezer. Okay guys, so that wraps up this preservation video. I hope that you guys liked it. If you did, please leave me a comment below if you want to see more videos like this of what I am doing. I have a ton of delicious peach recipes that I could share with you if that interests you. So just go ahead and leave me a comment below. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.